Step back into 1970s London, a gritty, rebellious city full of punk energy, smoke-filled pubs, and eccentric characters. The capital may have shed its rough edges over the years, but what we've gained in cleanliness and safety, we've lost in spirit. Join us as we take a nostalgic trip through a time when London's soul was raw, unfiltered, and undeniably alive. London in the 1970s was a world apart from the sanitized, tourist-friendly capital we know today. The streets were gritty, the air thick with the haze of tobacco smoke, and the pace of life far more unpredictable. It was a time when creativity ruled the day, and the streets felt like a playground for anyone brave enough to take part. The city hummed with energy, especially in areas like Camden and Soho, where bohemian culture, punk rock, and the working-class spirit created a melting pot of excitement and rebellion. One of the most iconic spaces in 1970s London was Camden Market, which back in the early days of 1974 began as a humble collection of 16 stalls in a former timber yard. It was an intimate place, a true reflection of London's working-class roots. The market wasn't a glossy commercial space like it is today, filled with mass-produced merchandise for tourists. It was a vibrant, chaotic haven for artists, punks, and collectors who were there not just to shop but to experience the pulse of the city. Dingwalls, the legendary music venue that opened in 1973, was the heartbeat of Camden. It was a place where you could catch The Clash, the Ramones, or Blondie before they made it big. Those days were defined by a rawness and authenticity that today's sanitized market has lost. The stalls that once sold quirky antiques and crafts are now replaced by mass-produced goods and overpriced street food. What's more heartbreaking is that the true creative community that once called Camden home has been priced out entirely, making room for the influx of tourists who are now drawn in by its commercial allure. Then there was Soho, London's bohemian heart, where the Coach and Horses pub on Greek Street became a gathering spot for the eccentric and the artistic. Famous figures like Geoffrey Bernard and Francis Bacon would hold court here, exchanging ideas over pints. These pubs weren't just places to grab a drink. They were the lifeblood of the city's social fabric. Each one had its own personality, a regular cast of characters, and a history steeped in tradition. The impact of gentrification and rising property prices has turned many of these iconic spots into luxury apartments or chain bars, slowly erasing the unique culture that made them special. The pub, a quintessential British institution, is in danger of disappearing altogether, with many historic buildings being transformed into high-end residences, far removed from their working-class roots. London's transformation is also reflected in its public transportation. In the 1970s, you could smoke on the underground, in cinemas, and even in hospitals. It was a different time, when life in the city moved at its own chaotic pace, and where you were free to light up a cigarette without fear of judgment. This may sound foreign to today's health-conscious Londoners, but back then, tobacco smoke was so ubiquitous that it became a part of the city's identity. The famed Circle Line, for instance, was a place where commuters could puff away without a second thought, enveloped in a haze of cigarette smoke. Teachers, doctors, and even bus drivers all shared in this smoky camaraderie, creating an air of rebelliousness that would be unimaginable today. And then there was punk rock. The Roxy Club in Neal Street, opened in 1977, became a punk mecca, where future legends like the Sex Pistols, the Damned, and Susie and the Banshees played before they achieved fame. It wasn't just about the music, it was about the sense of community. The Roxy was a venue where anyone could grab the mic between sets and where the walls were, covered in sweat and graffiti. It was the birthplace of a cultural revolution that forever altered the British music scene. Modern venues, with their strict rules and corporate sponsorships, simply couldn't replicate that anarchic energy. Trafalgar Square, once home to thousands of pigeons, also stood as a testament to a different, more chaotic London. Tourists flocked to the square to feed the pigeons, posing for photos as they were surrounded by the birds. But in 2003, Ken Livingstone, then mayor of London, banned pigeon feeding, citing hygiene concerns. The move resulted in the drastic decline of the pigeon population, transforming the square into a cleaner but far less vibrant space. The birds, who had been a part of London's identity for centuries, were gone, and with them, a piece of the city's unpolished charm. Meanwhile, the city's fashion and retail scene in the 70s was unlike anything we see today. Bieber, a department store on Kensington High Street, wasn't just a shop. It was an experience. Its 7 floors were a kaleidoscope of colors, textures, and sounds, offering everything from feather boas to tinned beans. It was a cultural institution, attracting the likes of Mick Jagger and your average Londoner alike. But as is often the case with creative ventures, Bieber's vision was at odds with the commercial realities of the time. When profit margins became more important than imagination, the store closed, leaving a void that no modern retailer has been able to fill. But perhaps one of the most striking changes in London life is the death of the Routemaster bus. The Routemaster, with its iconic open rear platform, was more than just a mode of transport. It was an institution. It symbolized the sense of freedom and spontaneity that characterized 1970s London. You could hop on or off at traffic lights, and the conductors had the power to create a sense of community on the bus, helping old ladies with shopping or letting broke students ride for free. The Routemaster's closure in 2005 marked the end of an era. Today, we have more accessible and safer buses, but they are far more regulated, with sealed doors, CCTV cameras, and a lack of the charm that made the Routemaster a beloved part of the city. The 1970s also saw a shift in the way the city's working class interacted with their environment. Rent prices were much lower, and young professionals could afford to live in central areas like Notting Hill and Mayfair. These neighborhoods were diverse and full of character, contributing to a culture that felt authentic and alive. But today, as property prices soar, these areas have become increasingly out of reach for the average person, contributing to a homogenization of London's culture. The city's creative energy, once fueled by this diversity, now feels diluted. The London of the 1970s was a city where chaos, creativity, and community thrived. While today's sanitized capital may be cleaner and safer, it lacks the raw spirit that made London so uniquely alive. As we reflect on what we've lost, let us not forget the vibrant, imperfect, and anarchic city that once was, and yearn for a future that brings some of that spirit back. If this walk down memory lane has sparked some nostalgia for the old London, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What memories do you have of the 70s London? Share them with us in the comments below.